Good afternoon or evening, everybody, and welcome back to another weather forecast here by Adrian's Weather Forecast. And this is going to be another tropical update on the North Atlantic as Tropical Storm Odette has formed in the northern Gulf Stream, heading possibly to bring in some slight impacts across Newfoundland and portions there, just overall southeastern Canada. Could still see some overall dangerous surf and as well rip currents with some potential for tropical storm wind gusts across that vicinity. And as well, we do now have Invest 95L and Invest 97L. A new Invest has formed just off the coast of Africa as we see another tropical trough moving in. And this could very well become something very interesting, but no threat to land. And most likely won't be anything too crazy, but still watching out for Invest 95L. And it's still at now a 90% for both the next 48 hours and for the next 5 days. But Odette right now is at 45 miles an hour. It did form earlier yesterday with, I believe, the expected peak is 65 miles an hour. But likely, as it gets picked up by the overall jet stream, it's going to start moving very, very quickly into the cold waters off Canada. So it's going to be basically subtropical very soon. However, in my opinion, I think this is subtropical now. I don't think it was ever tropical. I mean, it looks like a warm core storm. It looks very open. I mean, this is not like a great storm. I mean, this looks very similar to Tropical Storm Anna. So it's definitely not the best looking storm, but it is now moving northeast at 17 miles an hour with rather low pressure at 1,002 millibars. So it does have some overall good pressure drop in the actual low pressure itself, but this low pressure does not look closed whatsoever. And so, I mean, it's pretty wide open. There's really, as well, just no convection in the actual low pressure itself. So that's why I think this is most likely, in my opinion, it's always been subtropical. But here's Invest 95L now heading close towards, just expected to go northeast of the Caribbean. So showers and thunderstorms associated with an area of low pressure located about 650 miles east-southeast of the northern Leeward Islands continue to show signs of organization. So definitely that's exactly why this probability has increased. However, satellite derived wind data from a few hours ago indicated that the system does not yet have a well-defined surface circulation. Only a slight increase in organization of the system would lead to the formation of a tropical depression or a tropical storm, which is expected to occur late today or tonight while the low moves toward the west-northwest at about 15 miles an hour. So actually, they finally mentioned the word tropical storm, which they have not really mentioned. So there is showing that there is an increase in confidence in this, says by later today or tonight. So if this storm gets acted together and maybe closes off very soon, we could see tropical depression by the end of today. Upper level winds are likely to become less conducive for development when the system reaches its southwestern Atlantic by the early middle part of next week. So this doesn't really look like a long-term effect or threat towards Florida or the Bahamas. So there's still a little bit less confidence that this will become Peter, but it's still a possibility, and it's still, again, not out of the realm of possibilities. And then here we have 97L, which is a 50% now for both 48 hours and 5 days. So we're seeing a low pressure system located over the far eastern and Atlantic, a few hundred miles south-southwest of the Cape Verde Islands, and it continues to show some signs of organization and environmental conditions appear conducive for further development of the system. And a tropical depression could form over the next couple of days. However, again, this also is an invest that does not have the best conditions for the long run because there is going to be an intense amount of dry air. Obviously, this area is just always overrun by dry air, so it's going to probably be like a weak tropical depression or a very, very minimal system. Obviously, 95L will be more concerning than 97L. So let's not get the overall look at the overall discussion forecast and the overall peak and location for Odette in the next future hours and future runs. So initially right now it's at 45, but likely to get strengthening up to 50 and then even up to 65 within the next 48 or even 36 hours. So this could be a rather strong to moderately strong subtropical storm. So you can see it's going to be post-tropical or even extratropical. So this is going to be a rather strong post a tropical and extratropical system. Like I just say, I honestly think this is subtropical now. I don't think it was ever tropical, so I don't think this is really the best looking storm. I mean, just look at satellite imagery here on visible imagery. You can just see the low pressure is basically right there. You can see there's basically nothing. I mean, it looks like a normal low pressure that you typically see coming off the northeast or the mid-Atlantic. I mean, all the convection is basically located far, far east of anywhere close to this low circulation. I mean, I wouldn't even consider this low circulation. I mean, it's basically pretty open. I mean, you can't tell me this is closed. I mean, there's no way this is tropical. I mean, I really think this is subtropical. I mean, it does not look a cold core system whatsoever either. I mean, there's basically no convection whatsoever. There is no cold cloud tops whatsoever within this system, really. So, I mean, this could very well just be like a warm core system, which typically you would see with a subtropical system. It's tropical will obviously be warm core, or sorry, cold core, but this is looking like a warm core system. I mean, there's a low pressure right there. You basically have very little convection. I mean, you still see there's obviously really strong counterclockwise flow all around this whole system, which is why they have as tropical. But considering how it looks like a warm core system, this most likely will be most reasonably classified as subtropical. So I like I said, like I've been saying throughout the whole video, I think this is really more of a subtropical system. So here's the overall look at the tropics from Odette future forecast, and it does have a pretty large extensive wind field. So obviously it's only centered to the east of the actual low so I mean, there's split it into half of where the actual low circulation is, and there's basically nothing whatsoever in the western quadrant. I mean, it's so lopsided. I mean, it's such a messy storm. We typically see this like it's very, very common to see something like this in the northern Gulf Stream waters, where something's very subtropical like, and has a very large wind field. That the gesture just really helps this storm get its act together a little bit, but still again pushes it pretty fast. So it's gonna be going at a pretty fast rate, which is why it's gonna become extra tropical and subtropical very, very, very soon. So gonna be seeing a weird track though, because it looks like the National Hurricane Center wants this to kind of stall basically in the middle of next week here by Wednesday. But that's gonna be really around 65 miles an hour right here. So all those gonna be pretty far south like this and not going straight up for Newfoundland like we typically see. It's still gonna bring in probably some max wind gusts up to tropical storm winds across Newfoundland. Once we get towards really the early part of next week here, maybe around Monday, and even arriving by early as Sunday. But here's the overall look at the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds. So there are the very far southern parts of Newfoundland that are actually within a 20 to 30%. Actually, no, that's a 10 to 20%, I believe. So yeah, it's 10 to 20%. So it's pretty low, but like I said, there is still a possibility we could see max gust up to tropical storm winds. So here's the overall look at the wind field. So looking obviously by Saturday later today, you're gonna be seeing the winds arriving, but really, this whole thing is really not too important, really, because it's kind of obvious all of it's gonna kind of be off the coast. And even portions of Nova Scotia have a small percent, a 5 to 10%, with the very far edge just outside of a 10 to 20%. So rather, not gonna be anything too crazy and shouldn't be a big concern. Again, it's expected to continue to strengthen for a little while, for the next around 36 hours. So we're most likely going to see our peak by tomorrow evening, and then at this point, it's going to gradually, slowly weaken, because within a system like this, it could kind of still withstand those waters. It's obviously be at this point extra tropical, so the winds will still be pretty strong, but it wouldn't be considered tropical, so it really wouldn't go under its record of it like continuing to stay at this strength, because obviously we typically see these low pressures that go all the way up north like that. With the overall, with the correlative effect, it just helps this overall spin stay pretty strong until the point it gets too far north, and then it just really falls apart. But with the correlative effect, you typically just see something like this. Like it's pretty normal where low pressures, the winds actually really strengthen, and once they get close to Greenland or Newfoundland, but it's really not saying like it's getting to like hurricane strength. It's just the overall winds are strengthening, but at this point it's not anything tropical. That's what's going to happen here. It's going to gradually kind of weaken. Really, at this point it's going to be far gone, like extra tropical, and we wouldn't have any advisories on it from the National Hurricane Center. So that's kind of the overall explanation of why it's not going to rapidly weaken over those really cold waters. So let's go look at the overall 10-meter wind forecast from the GFS for Odette. So obviously it's going to be pretty just overall like a really large wind field, typically very common within these northwest Atlantic storms. We kind of saw it a little bit with Henri. And then kind of see some pretty strong winds though. I mean, 60 miles an hour right there in the overall western quadrant. Could still see some gusty winds on the coast of Nova Scotia. Probably a chance of getting it to 35 miles an hour, sustained just off the coast. And then as we go closer now to Newfoundland, we see to 64 miles an hour. So the GFS is kind of really agreeing within the overall National Hurricane Center. So let's now look at Canada and look at Newfoundland. So this is actually going to take us now to 10-meter wind speeds in kilometers per hour. And they're going to be basically seeing here. I'm not really the best at kilometers per hour. I'm really just good with knots. Actually, let's go to 10-meter. Let's go to knots. So let's go to knots instead. So you can right there in far southeastern Nova Scotia, basically, like I said, around Mondays, basically when we'll see the strongest winds. We're going to get on the coast there up to 38 knots, probably getting up to 40 knots. So obviously, even sustained, it's sustained, obviously, this 10-meter wind sustained, we can get maybe a small chance for tropical storm winds sustained, but very, very minimal, because we can probably get up to, what, this is like, what, 42 miles an hour right on the coast, or 42 knots, which is basically around 50-ish miles an hour. So there is still a chance we could get probably minimal power outages, maybe a few trees down, but there is still a chance with this, with how extensive, considering how extensive the overall winds was going to be. We'll kind of just vary on how strong the winds are. Let's get to the overall 10-meter wind gust on knots to get an idea what the gusts would be like. So the gusts actually would get up to here around 53, with even right here in the far southern tip getting up to maybe 55 knots. Gusts, obviously, that's around 63 miles an hour. So we're going to be seeing overall some pretty strong gusts across Newfoundland. Let's take a look at the overall wave height here. So we're going to be seeing some pretty overall strong waves at 16 feet, maybe even getting up to 20 feet. And if we now go to Newfoundland as well, if we go to Newfoundland, actually, we don't actually have a map for Newfoundland, but you can overall see if we go back to the Northwest Atlantic, you can kind of just see overall there is going to be some pretty overall strong waves with this counterclockwise flow, so we could see some minimal storm surge expected as well, with as well increasing the surf and as well overall rip current. So here's a look here at Invest 95L, and here's the overall look at the low pressure. Basically, it's around just in this general vicinity. You kind of see decent amount of convection. Obviously, it looks a lot better, I guess you'd say, cloud cover wise than Odette, the tropical storm. But it's kind of, I mean, it's really not much to say, really. I mean, we have a good amount of convection, specifically north of the overall low pressure. You can see kind of some overall divergent flow of stars cloud kind of stretching out. So this overall really, really weak outflow starting to develop here, as well as some decent amount of convection kind of developing to the southeast of the low pressure. So overall, it's getting to act together, and that's why we can really the possibility that this does become a tropical depression within the next few hours. Let me actually move my screen like that a little bit, like that, and there we go. So here's the overall look at Invest 95L. So really a lot of confidence has really just overall decreased. There is still a chance that we could get a very, very minimal and short-lived tropical storm. I mean, the majority still want to have this form. You can see the majority are having this get over 35 knots. So although we're not looking at the overall models going like this or like that, we are still seeing that there is an overall still decent confidence this could still become maybe a borderline tropical storm. I mean, it could be very well be like a 40-mile-an-hour type system here. I mean, we're not looking at anything too crazy. So like I said, the confidence is kind of lowering, but there is still that realm of possibility that it could still become tropical storm Peter. Here's the overall look at the GEFS tracks, minimal center pressure. So these are actually really having high confidence with the overall mean. You can kind of see the mean getting up to 982 millibars for minimal center pressure, and seeing a wide variety of tracks. I mean, some taking it all the way to Cuba, and then some taking it all the way like that. So there's really since the overall strength is so unpredictable with this storm, really, we don't know how it's going to react or how it's going to continue to whether it's going to continue to get its act together or not. So with that being said, the overall prediction on the track is all over the place. I mean, who knows? This could very well go into Hispaniola, which is very unlikely, or I can go Bermuda, which is, I mean, it's around the possibility, but the strength is the really thing we really want to know, really, because, I mean, the ensembles, a lot of members are getting the sub 980 millibars, while global models, on the other hand, are really struggling with forming, and even the National Hurricane Center is mentioning that the conditions will become less conducive once it gets towards the southwestern Atlantic. So we're gonna see how it goes as it goes north of the Caribbean and north of the Lesser Antilles and Greater Antilles. But the overall members and the ensembles are having a lot more confidence. But let's go look at the overall track guidance. So again, like I've been mentioning since this became an AOI, most likely not going to hit the Caribbean. Could still see some impacts, very minimal impacts for the Western Antilles near the U.S. Virgin Islands, but expected to go out to sea with the overall ridging pattern, as well with the setup trough and the near the Bahamas vicinity. So here's a look here now at Invest 97L, the newly formed Invest that we have so far, which is the 50% off Africa near Cape Verde Islands. So basically the low pressure is basically right here. It actually has a decent amount of convection, which we typically see with these strong amount of overall convection, kind of convection waves coming off Africa. And those are really always highlighted. Kind of typically see with the African easterly waves or AEWs. And this one's looking pretty good, though. I mean, the low pressure is right there. Decent convection development right to the actual center itself. I mean, this looks pretty decent. I mean, it definitely does not have the worst structure considering it's a new Invest. Here's the overall look at the track. So likely to go basically kind of just due northwest or almost due north. And again, no, it's not going to be a threat to any land. Here's the overall look at the GEFS track and minimal center pressure. And a few of these ensembles are actually getting it to tropical storm worthy pressure with the mean actually 1,004 millibars. So there is a chance this could become maybe a tropical depression. A tropical storm, in my opinion, is pretty much not going to be the most reasonable. Or, I mean, at least, I guess, I wouldn't say like it's the most reasonable, but it could still be a possibility if it gets its act together. Because it has a pretty good environment, at least for the next few days. But once it kind of goes way up there by the middle of the next week, it's going to run into some really intense dry air and a decent amount of shear as well. So it's not to get its act together. Probably become a tropical depression in the next few days. But let's look at the overall intensity guidance, and these are having a really good amount of confidence that they typically have on the early advisories, but see how that went for 95L. But they want to have it become anywhere from a low end to a high end tropical storm. It's really all over the place. And like I said, these early ensembles, these tracks or these intensity guidances are always misleading. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that it becomes Rose, obviously, if Peter forms first. But there, I mean, it can't be ruled out, but I wouldn't call it super likely or even likely in general or even reasonable. But the conditions aren't shabby and it looks pretty decent right now. So we will see whether it does close off and whether it does surprise me and it does form to a tropical storm. But a tropical depression is definitely not out of the possibility. Not honestly think a tropical depression could very well be likely. So here's now a look at the 12Z GFS run. So let's see what they have. So there we have Odette, there we have 95L, and there we have 97L. There you see the overall broad area of a tropical wave trough. Same thing basically kind of right here within 95L, and there you see the overall trough, a open wave trough right here within 90 or within Odette as well. So 1,001 millibars, likely to get at together, continue to strengthen as it goes up the Gulf Stream, then getting into the triple digits pressure wise at 993, and then 95 and 97 are both at 1,010 millibars. So gonna watch out whether we can get a tropical depression very soon within these systems. But then just like 95 just kind of just dies out as it goes north of the Caribbean. I mean, it's 1,008 millibars. There we have 1,009 for 97L, but at this point 97L really has the kind of the best chance you kind of see. There's the trough right there. You still see the trough right here within 95L, and really just kind of just dies out really on the GFS. I mean, 1,010 millibars, 97L doesn't really become anything really. I mean, there's a chance it could become a tropical depression. 1,000 getting to 1,008 millibars, then 1,010. I mean, it's really just not looking too good. But I mean, the GFS as well has really absolutely nothing within 95L, which they were initially having it get to a hurricane, out to sea hurricane. That's why you really don't trust just a few runs and calling it a trend. But look at the CMC though. The CMC is actually taking a different approach for both of these systems, getting really both pretty decent pressure pretty early on. They have within the next 24 hours having Invest 95L at 1009 millibars and 1010 millibars straight off the bat for 97L. And then look at this, 1007 millibars there for 95L. Then 1008 millibars there for 97L. There you see the overall trough right there, and here's the trough right here. So it's still overall good troughs, but then really it just dies. 97L just dies, and that's why I said tropical storm is really not really likely, because there's just drier just ruins it. You can kind of see the really strong ridge up here. That's gonna just cause some really overall dramatic amount of dry air. With these overall tighter winds surrounding the overall ridge, you're going to be seeing those tighter winds kind of closer to the bottom half of that ridge. That's going to release an intense amount of dry air. It's going to kill a buck. CFC is doing something very interesting here within 95L, keeping it at 1006 millibars. So that's definitely actually even at 1005 millibars just north of East Norlaw. So it's going to be very interesting. But again, in the end, they don't have it forming whatsoever. Let's now look at the overall track, or the overall steering pattern. So, like I said, there you see the overall trough kind of steering 97L. It's basically just really the jet stream here, the normal jet stream. Here the Rosby waves like that. There's the Canadian Ridge, basically pretty far north, if you say so. There's a Bermuda High, or not the Bermuda High, sorry, the Canadian High is right here. Here's the Bermuda High around right here, and there you see the wind I'm talking about. Really seeing some strong wind within this ridge kind of right here. And there you see an overall good view of 95L, seeing an overall decent outflow channel. Really, it's not too shabby. Like I said, there is some outflow trying to develop to the southwest, but really right now it's in a pretty conducive environment with really weak upper level winds, so not too shabby as well. 97L going into a pretty conducive environment, very little to no upper level winds. But there's a trough setting up right here, really decent tut right there. And that's gonna help steer. 95L basically kind of just north like that, basically. So that's why it's gonna go that way, basically like that. And then I'm not sure why the GFS isn't loading. And there, I mean, just the overall track right there with that trough kind of steering it away from the Bahamas. And it's just gonna get picked up by that trough. So at that trough, as obviously typically what you'd see when storms or low pressures kind of come to the east, to the east of a trough, it kind of the trough just picks it up like that. It just picks it up like that with some southerlies and just steers it northwest, if anything north. And we're gonna kind of see a little bit, because as that trough now migrates to the Bahamas and that area, although the low pressure is going to kind of just go that way, it's going to then get picked up like that. And that's what we're going to be seeing within 95L. And there's really not much really mentioned within 97L steering. But we could look at the dry air for 97L, because they're just absolutely hammered within overall intense amount of dry air. And you can kind of see this tropical wave is going to be overall, it's going to be kind of strong now, which we typically see really strong confidence. I mean, overall good, really wave. And then it just falls apart. I mean, that dry ice is just gonna eat it up alive, basically. So hope you guys enjoyed the video though, and I'll see you guys later.